So do you want me to do this?
Yeah, you do the
stupid
intro
thing?
to here when he says when he tells you to go.
Hi, I'm Dave Gibbons. Welcome to SYFY TV.
One of your big early projects was working on 2000 AD.
Yeah.
You do an insane number of issues of that series. What did you learn on that series? Because one thing you're always known for, I don't think I've ever heard anybody say, "Oh, Dave Gibbons missed a deadline." You know, so you learned how to crank them out early.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was told at quite an early age that if you want to succeed in the comic book business, there are 3 qualities, and if you've got 2 of them, you stand a chance. The 3 qualities: number 1, you're really good. You're a genius. They're going to use your work no matter what. Number 2, you're reliable, because really, when it comes down to it, you know, do you want it good or do you want it Tuesday? They want it Tuesday. And the third one was to be a nice guy, because you have to deal with editors and nobody wants to deal with somebody who's difficult. And I think to start with, even if I wasn't that good, I could be reliable and I could be and am a reasonably nice guy. So for 2000 AD, I've got vivid memories of I used to have to stand outside my house and get on a certain bus every Tuesday to take the artwork to the railroad station to send it to London so it could go to press that day. And if I wasn't there for that bus, I was in big trouble. Wow. So that taught me a lot of discipline, and it also taught me that you need to get on with it. To have a deadline is actually your friend. It makes you do the work. The problem with monthly comics is you can hang around for 3 weeks looking out the window, sketching, fiddling, and then all of a sudden you have to rush it. So I think by the time I made it to American comics, having done weekly deadlines, monthly deadline was a piece of cake. But then what happened was, for reasons we could barely figure out, DC sent their managing editors over to the UK to recruit British artists. Myself, Brian Bolland, Kevin O'Neill, eventually Alan Moore and some other writers. But they wanted us to go and work for them, and they offered us more money. They offered us reprint money, which we didn't get in England. They offered us royalties. They offered us artwork return, which we didn't get.
And the royalties wasn't happening back then in the comics industry.
They even gave us the art board to draw on. So it was an offer that we couldn't refuse. We found out later. Well, I found out from a sort of slightly cynical American artist friend of mine that DC were fearing that the artists were going to form a guild, so they thought they'd better have some offshore talent waiting to fill the gap if all the artists went on strike. But no, but I was really flattered. I loved DC Comics as a kid. They were my favourite comics, much more than Marvel. And so I started doing backups for them. And then Len Wein offered me the lead Green Lantern strip. And we did that for a year or so, and then he later went on to recruit Alan Moore. He phoned me up for Alan Moore's phone number because they wanted somebody to revive Swamp Thing. And then
and that's how Alan got on Swamp Thing?
The phone rang one night and Len said, "Oh, Dave, we're trying to get hold of a writer called Alan Moore. Do you have a contact detail?" I said, "Sure, I've got his phone number." And he phoned Alan up and said, "Oh, hi, this is Len Wein, I'm an editor at DC Comics." And Alan went, "Yeah, sure," and just put the phone down because he thought it was a friend pranking him. But anyway, they did eventually make contact. And then Len, for a while, was the editor of Watchmen. So, yeah, and of course, very sadly, he passed away. But he was a very nice man. He was absolutely, you know, he was comics to the core. He was a guy who loved comics, and I think you can see his love of comics in his work. And a wonderful writer. I always used to be amazed. I'd draw from his plots, and he'd write the script, and it would exactly fit the space that I'd left for it. And his ballooning was just perfect. So I learned a lot from working with Len. He's a very nice man.
Len is the editor of Watchmen. You and Alan are working on it. I'm curious how Len worked with you guys on the story and the role of the editor in that story.
Well, I mean, I would have to say, not to take anything away from Len or from Barbara Randall, who later edited it, but we really didn't need a lot of editing. Alan would write a full script after we'd talked about it on the phone. I'd get it, I'd draw it, I'd send the pages to John Higgins, who lived just up the road from me, the colorist. We go through the color together, and then we just send the whole job, the art, all fully lettered, the colors already done, send it to New York, and they would proofread it, but there really wasn't a lot of editorial input in the traditional way. So Len's
It's
role.
shocking considering how massive and important that story is, that there wasn't that much editorial
Well, it's true.
nitpicking and stuff.
Well, it's true. There wasn't a lot of editorial nitpicking. With Watchmen, they thought, well, we've got nothing to lose. These characters are clones of other characters, so we'll just let them do what they want, which of course was wonderful because there was no restriction on what we did at all. The only way we could have done Watchmen was if we loved superheroes. If we despised them, it wouldn't have been a good book. It wouldn't have been an interesting story. It wouldn't have been as popular a story. We were kind of celebrating superheroes and showing the different types. And for all the bleak issues like Rorschach with his blots and his dead dogs and his terrible things happening, you got an issue with Night Owl where he was flying his owl ship and making love to the gorgeous woman's superhero, So we did have light and shade in it. But it seemed to me the American comic book business took from it, this is how you have to do
Dark,
superheroes.
dark.
The darker the better. And I think that wasn't the right conclusion.
Well, that's interesting that you said, because you're right. It did make a major shift in the comics.
It did. And we felt very guilty about that. It was our fault that you had to read all those miserable comics.
Tell me about the character designs and you coming up with the designs for each of the characters in Watchmen. Was that out of a conversation you and Alan would have about the characters, or was it give me some ideas and then you'd sketch them out and send it to him? How would that go?
Yeah, we talked about who the new characters might be because they were obviously kind of. The thing that we found about the Charlton characters was that they kind of covered all the archetypes of comic book characters. You had the detective hero, then you had the kind of Batman hero with a bat cave and gadgets and a plane and all that kind of stuff. Then you had the kind of militaristic hero who was the comedian. And of course it was tremendously freeing to come up with new characters because we could make them look exactly how we wanted them to look. We could come up with our own continuity. We weren't bound to anything from the past. And we originally got the names of the characters right. And I was really thrilled because I'd created, when I was a kid, a character called Night Owl, who was exactly the sort of character we needed for the Batman role. So Alan said, that's great, that's a great name. And in fact, the costume that I designed when I was 14 years old, we actually used as the costume of the Golden Age Night Owl. So that as a fanboy was great to actually. But no, I did a bunch of designs and we refined them. And I wanted all the characters to look different in their physical types, not just a standard, muscular guy. You had Night Owl who was kind of had a paunch, and you had Dr. Manhattan who'd remodeled himself as the perfect human specimen, And then you had Ozymandias, who was more athletic, and the comedian who was very thick-set. I wanted them all to have really recognisable silhouettes. And of course it was interesting, it was in the course of the character design that I came up with the smiley face badge. Because for the comedian, I knew he couldn't look like the Joker because that had been kind of done, the mad clown. Mm-hmm. And I thought, what other kind of comedians are there? Groucho Marx, the moustache, cigar, and a kind of real dry, deadpan wit. So that's who I based the comedian on. I first of all did him in a kind of military uniform, kind of camouflage, but that looked a bit dull. And then we thought maybe he could be, in kind of almost bondage stuff with straps. And so we drew that.
Big barrel chest.
Yeah, and I thought he looks kind of bleak now. He needs something. I thought, I know, smiley face. So I just drew a little smiley face, but really tiny. And then when Alan came to write the first issue, he said, hey, I know what that badge could be lying in the gutter. And that's the symbol of the comedian is dead, that's his symbol. And then of course Alan took that and it became the symbol of the whole series, the cartoon image with reality splashed across it. But I never had that in mind when I drew the smiley face. So that was an example of how the sort of creative synergy worked.
Is it kind of a bummer, for lack of a better word, that you can't share in like the never-ending acclaim and all the other sort of stuff about Watchmen with Alan, because he's kind of separated himself from it?
Yeah, I mean...
And you're obviously still friends with him, so... But
well, you say I'm obviously still friends with him. I honestly haven't spoken to Alan for several years, We were very friendly back in the day. And I very much regret that we got to the point where external circumstances meant the end of that friendship. I certainly can put my hand on my heart and say I did everything I could for it not to happen, but it kind of had an inevitability about it. And I respect Alan, you know, I mean, he lives his own life, and he's a very rational man, he's a very passionate man, and I totally respect his decision to do whatever the hell he wants.
Kingsman has been a massive success for you and Mark Miller.
Yeah.
Second film just came out, #1 film in the world, and you just released another chapter in the comic book history of it. One, I imagine that's a very fun book to work on. I'm imagining you and Mark Miller together breaking story is quite an entertaining afternoon.
Yeah. Well, you know, Mark wrote me a fan letter when he was 16, and I just finished doing Watchmen. And Mark then was exactly as he is now, absolutely full of self-confidence and ideas. And he wrote me a letter saying, "Hi Dave, quite enjoyed Watchmen. Your next career move should be to illustrate this story that I've written." And I've got no memory of that, but he kept the letter that I sent back. There was a very gracious letter, almost, you know, thanks kid, but, you know.
Get lost.
Yeah, thanks. And I did him a sketch as well, and he has never forgotten this. And then
He still has that.
He still has it. And then I started to see his name appear. He wrote some stuff for DC, Adventures of Superman, which was their more juvenile aimed version of Superman. And I thought, these are really nice little stories. And they're not dark and they're not grim. They're just really good little superhero stories. And then he started to work for Marvel. And then he came out with Brian Hitch doing The Ultimates. And I was a fanboy to what Mark was doing. I'd haunt my local comic book store. Is the new issue of The Ultimates out yet? And we got to know each other a bit by that time. And as happens, you know, when you go to shows and you talk to each other, if you get on well with somebody, you think, wouldn't it be great to do something together? And so we had a long-standing wish to do that, and the timing came right. And he proposed like a spy thing to me, that he told me he'd kind of developed the idea with Matthew Vaughn when Matthew was filming one of the X-Men movies. The idea was to do something that recreated that kind of buzz, that was set in that kind of world. And originally we were going to set it in America, and it was going to be called Uncle Sam, where it would be the kid and his uncle, who happened to be called Sam, and he was working for the CIA or something. And then we thought, no, let's set it in England, because then it can be like a proper James Bond type film. And we can play upon the English class system. You know, we've got the posh, cultured, older spy and the rough kid from the streets who needs the corners knocking off, you know.
Excellent. Dave, thank you very much.
I just got started. What about the later years? I mean, we've done my early struggle, and that's quite interesting. Come on, what about...
I mean, what else you need me to ask you something? I'll ask you something else.
What about where I crush my enemies?